After issue 49, PlayStation Plus magazine rebranded itself as PlayNation, with issues 50 to 62 switching to a more traditional rating system. Although in my case, I don't have to spend time searching for them, as reviews are shown on the magazine as the first thing to see right out of the gate. So for this one, I managed to find 35 games that qualify for this video. Why? Because for this one, I set the maximum to 4 out of 10, and I will instead sort them by rating. That, and I'm almost done with this magazine anyhow. The Forcing Arcade is proud to present PlayStation Plus magazine's worst rated games, Part 2, the PlayNation era. Let's begin with the first group, which are games that got a 4 out of 10 rating from PlayNation. First up, we have OverBlood 2. Developed by Riverhillsoft in 1998, this game never saw a North American release, unlike its predecessor, meaning it was only sold in Japan and Europe. The English release came to PAL region sometime in 2000 or 2001, with the mini review from issue 50, which is the first issue for its PlayNation redesign. Page 35 of issue 50 had Gus write mini reviews for 6 games in one page, one of which coming up later in this video, with OverBlood 2 being one of those games. In Gus's words, OverBlood 2 is what Final Fantasy would look like if it was done for a tenner by a couple of blokes with no typing skills. Aside from ripping off chunks of the Final Fantasy ambience, he also said it leaps between sub-Tomb Raider 3D sections and badly rendered walkabouts, with bored voice actors droning through their dialogue. With extra criticism toward the boring cutscenes and the game itself not being any better, he finished his quick review with a score of 4 out of 10. Taking things to the green, we have CyberTiger, first released in 1999. Published and developed by Electronic Arts, CyberTiger takes a step back from Tiger Woods' PGA simulation style. Instead, it has more of an arcade feel to it, with cartoony style animations, fast gameplay, and elements added to make the game of golf more lively than a real-life counterpart. Reviewed on issue 52, Steve F. wrote that no amount of comedy trimmings can save this tripe that's too simple for golf lovers and too boring for the rest of us. The controls are simplified, as you simply pull back on your DualShock analog stick to power up and then push forward to smack the ball, with left and right directional buttons applying a little spin. But no matter how you try to tart it up, it's still golf at the end of the day, as Steve also criticized the game for the annoying quips from Tiger Woods himself and the poor visuals with blocky scenery and crap cartoon characters. He gave it a 4 out of 10, calling CyberTiger the PlayStation equivalent of your dad trying to breakdance. Funny for 5 minutes, but it looks duff, while the Tigerism will make you hate all Americans. Like I said in part 1, there were still more games from the embattled publisher Acclaim to look into. But luckily for them, we only have 2 games from them this time around, both of which having the weak, but not nearly as abysmal scores of 4 out of 10. First of the 2 is South Park Rally, one of the 3 games that were released during the height of the show's popularity in its early days. Developed by Tantalus Interactive in only 7 months, displays somewhat differently to other kart racers of a time, as instead of simply trying to finish first in a race, there are various objectives in races that encourage you to interact with other players or opponents. Alex reviewed South Park Rally as part of issue 54, who criticized the game for the fiddly controls, poorly designed tracks, the deathmatch levels being clunky and random, the off-the-wall gags being samey, and the terrible backgrounds. While he did praise the objective system for bringing more variety, the problem is that it sometimes becomes too complicated. He concluded the review with a 4 out of 10 rating, with South Park Rally being another example of a nice idea being poorly executed, resulting in a tossy game like this. Released in 1999, Stealth Patrol is the first console adaptation of the long-running PC military Spec Ops series. Developed by Runecraft, it saw a naff reception over at Moby Games, with an average of 64% based on 13 ratings. While most critic reviews were pretty high for a budget game, with scores mostly being at the 70% territory, Spec Ops Stealth Patrol didn't exactly get a warm welcome by PlayStation Plus, now known as PlayNation, when it was reviewed on issue 55. Strangely, it's the first game on the video whose PlayStation Plus / PlayNation review doesn't actually credit the writer. In Spec Ops Stealth Assault, you play a team of highly trained commandos dropped into enemy territory with a bag full of high-end military hardware, and what you do in the game is to complete battlefield objectives such as protecting convoys and overrunning obstacles. However, the review pointed out that the targeting system is really dodgy and random, with the enemies being so stupid it will be a shame to kill them, and the team bit doesn't work at all. You see, if you are going solo, your battle buddies just stand around like dorks if you leave them behind. It's like having a few lives, except you have to go back to where you've left your teammate when your first bloke cops it. Although the team bit works far better in 2-player co-op, the graphics took a pounding from them. Not that they weren't anything great to begin with, being a budget game and all. And so, the game got a score of 4 out of 10. A sequel to Konami's turn-based RPG that's comparable to the more famous Fire Emblem series, Vandal Hearts II released in Japan and North America in 1999, with the PAL version coming out the following year. The story takes place in the already collapsed church state of Nervadia that was once formed by the religious leader Saint Nervath, but eventually ceased to exist because of several conflicts between unbelievers and local rulers. Caused by a chain of coincidences, the young boy Joshua, from a small and unimportant village in the east, eventually finds himself within a complex political scheme set in motion by power-hungry aristocrats and religious fanatics. Another anonymous review for PlayStation Plus / PlayNation, also from issue 55, it starts off by saying that this turn-based RPG looks like if it was made for the Mega Drive. That would have been forgivable if there had been a solid core of gameplay in there that will repay you for putting up with its visuals, which the magazine called them awful. But for them, there isn't, as they wrote that Vandal Hearts II just rumbles along, spicing up the lousy cartoony graphics with seemingly endless chunks of badly translated dialogue and huge number-crunching turn-based battles that seem far too random. While they did praise the game for having loads of items and spells to get to grips with, the enormous game world and the game's quest that will last for literally months, they still gave it a 4 out of 10 because it lacks even the limited pizzazz of its predecessor, suggesting that if you play the original Vandal Hearts, you're best off steering clear of this sequel. Released in 2000 for PlayStation and PC, World Championship Snooker comes to us from Codemasters and Blade Interactive Studios. In this snooker simulation, you get to train in masterclasses, play a single match, and partake in official tournaments and a World Championship. You can play against many professional snooker players, including the likes of Mark Williams and Stefan Hendry, each with her own style and qualities. Over at Hobby Games, World Championship Snooker was well received by critics for both PC and PlayStation alike, with the latter version carrying an overall score of 77% from 8 critics. Absolute PlayStation gave it a score of 94 out of 100 in their May 2000 issue, while Just Games Retro gave it a score of 4 out of 5 in their All 9 review from December 5th, 2015. It was generally agreed by most critics to be one of the best billiard games the PlayStation had to offer, though Les was not exactly on the same boat when he reviewed it on issue 56. He starts out by saying that snooker is one of those sports that's still crying out for a decent game to be made of it. After all, it took a while for Brian Lara, also by Codemasters, to come along and do this for cricket, but PlayStation Snooker was still wallowing in the as exciting as maths category. With his criticism toward the matches taking forever to accomplish everything, he wrote it would take someone with godlike patience to play it properly, and even snooker fans will get bored and head off to play it for real down at the local mall. Besides saying that it's for those who really believe Steve Davis deserved to win Sports Personality of the Year when he did, he wrapped up the review with a score of 4 out of 10, writing that even if you love the real thing, World Championship Snooker will try your patience further than most annoying of little brothers, and you will have preferred to paint a wall and watch it dry. Known in Japan as Opakyun, Ghoul Panic first came out in arcades in 1999, with the PlayStation port coming out the following year. Developed by Raising, the same studio behind the first 3 Bloody Roar games, it's a comedy adventure game set in a haunted mansion, where you try to take down vampires, monsters, mummies, skeletons, and spooks to open the locked doors and uncover hidden bonuses. As one of many Namco titles to make use of their G-Con 45 light gun, although it could also be played with a controller or a PlayStation mouse, the back of the box of the PAL release also lets us know that this was from the creators of Point Blank. You could probably say that Ghoul Panic is practically a Point Blank spin-off. Besides the free difficulties and hidden game modes, Ghoul Panic also adds additional modes exclusive to the PlayStation port, including Survival, Adventure, and Remix modes. Adam wrote the review for Ghoul Panic on issue 56, who goes out of his way to say that although it was from the makers of Point Blank, it was not fit to clean its big brother's boots, also calling it a kindergarten version of that premier late-night shooter. Much like in Point Blank, you're popping lead against the clock, but the issue he had was that there's little variety, as well as the game being childish. He ended the review with a score of 4 out of 10, reckoning that Ghoul Panic is a shooter that's well wide of a mark, due to the game being samey, kiddie, and not much fun. He also wrote that PS1 owners want gun games to be like Lethal Weapon, but all this game needed is a lethal injection. The second of the 2 only titles from Acclaim for Part 2, Armorines Project Swarm was first released for the Nintendo 64 in 1999, with the PlayStation version coming out the next year. This was the last game to be developed by Probe Entertainment, the studio behind Forsaken, Revolt, and Alien Trilogy. While the company would end up being closed down in April of 2000, Probe Entertainment had quite an impressive legacy, having developed more than 22 conversions spanning 10 different formats of Sega's arcade hit Outrun. They were also responsible for porting Mortal Kombat 2 from arcade to 10 different consoles, handhelds, and home computers, 7 of which were released within a few months in 1994 alone. Using the same engine as Turok 2 and having similar themes and elements to the film Starship Troopers, it's a first-person shooter where in a not distant future you strenuously fight against bugs of all sizes, as you attempt to impede the enemies from eliminating human civilization as we know it. Dino decided to go on a bug hunt for issue 56, who wrote that Armorines is off to a bad start by being based on a ropey Nintendo 64 game, which was where it originally made its debut. The points of contention from Dino include the graphics that are about as sharp as processed cheese and just as bland, the frustrating control scheme, the dull deathmatch mode, and the game's performance slowing down when multiple enemies are present at the same time. While co-op mode admittedly works well, the slowdown is doubled when playing with a buddy, which is a massive caveat. Dino finished the review with a score of 4 out of 10, saying that if you want to be entertained by giant bugs chowing down on fresh meathead humans, you should just rent Starship Troopers. While he'd only recommend Armorines if a straitjacket suits you. Another EA Sports title for the video next is Championship Bass, released in 2000 for PlayStation and Windows. This one was developed by EA's Seattle studio, who also worked on early Need for Speed games. And before they were bought up by EA, the studio was known at the time as Manley and Associates, and prior to the acquisition, they made titles like Pink Goes to Hollywood, Dino Park Tycoon, the Super Nintendo adaptation of The Wizard of Oz, and An American Tale, The Computer Adventures of Thievul and His Friends. With Pi Incorporated providing a helping hand, or fin, in development, it was meant to be Electronic Arts' attempt at a bass fishing simulator, with the game's artificial intelligence creating a realistic simulated bass behavior. False strikes, swerves, return attacks, and short strike lunges. Even if the player does land a strike, the fish will go for obstacles in order to break the line. The game offers multiple difficulty levels, plenty of tricks in your lure box, multiple game modes, multiple lakes, and more. Rob makes a triumphant return for part 2 for his review on issue 57, who already starts off writing that Championship Bass captured the bone-grinding tedium of real-world fishing like no other genre in the game, as you'll spend most of your time staring out at the still waters, wondering if there are any fish in there at all. While it was well detailed and the difficulty level is probably spot on in terms of realism, it's just not entertaining. And frankly, the game made no effort to entertain whatsoever. He reckoned that it's far too difficult to land the whoppers you need to win. With a score of 4 out of 10, he made it clear that folks want less realism and more entertainment. Originally released on PC in 1999, Crusaders of Might and Magic tells the story of Drake, a loner who was toughened by exposure, hardship, and a life of fighting the scourge that destroyed his family as a boy. Swept up into the midst of a new crusade, he must join the High Guard as they try to rid the lands of the Legion of the Fallen. While the original PC release wasn't exactly something to write home about, the game was later ported to the PlayStation the following year by the 3DO company's Austin studio, whose only other game they made was the PS1 version of Warriors of Might and Magic, which came out the same year. Much like the PC version, it was also met with mostly mediocre reviews, with an average score of 54% on Moby Games. Steve reviewed this one for issue 57, who proceeded to say that Crusaders of Might and Magic is not so much a proper RPG, but more of a fighting platformer akin to Soul Reaver, except with a dull combat system, shabby plot, and poor graphics. Not to mention it was dull and duller. While he wrote that the spell system was somewhat impressive, the spells aren't that easy to use, and the combat is nothing more than a half-arsed beat-em up. One other problem Steve wrote was how changing weapons and spells is a total pain in the neck, as you have to frequently press the select button to enter a clunky, badly designed menu screen to scroll through the options, which is less than ideal when trying to fight off a horde of goblins. Steve ended the review with a score of 4 out of 10, saying that Crusaders of Might and Magic is just Soul Reaver minus the atmosphere and imagination. It was no good for RPG fans because it's not in-depth enough, and not good for everyone else because it's bloody boring. This is the third time EA makes an appearance on Part 2, this time being NHL Rock the Rink, released exclusively for the PlayStation in 2000. Rock the Rink was EA's attempt to recreate the success of NFL Blitz with this crossover 3-on-3 hockey/wrestling title. It includes all the teams from the NHL as well as created teams and over-the-top checking, fighting, and power-up skating. Rock the Rink was developed by EA's Canada studio. Known today as EA Vancouver, they are the main studio that Electronic Arts usually assigned for development of EA Sports titles like EA Sports FC, formerly known as the FIFA series, and the modern NHL games, as well as the early Need for Speed games, though they would also develop technologies for use by other EA subsidiaries. Les decided to rock the rink himself when he reviewed the game on issue 57, who starts by describing the game as ice hockey meets speedball, and it gets his head kicked in as a result. He wrote that obviously the people at EA Canada have realized that there is only so much you can do with an ice hockey game. Just churning out the same game out year after year with a few statistical changes to keep it going should get them rumbled by the gaming equivalent of the Fraud Squad. So in order for Rock the Rink to be a change of pace, they tweaked the graphics so that they don't look quite as polished to keep in feel with the rawness of a game, axed most of the rules, and thrown in a few teams with silly names. While it was fun to beat the daylights out of a team and then stick in a goal just to rub salt into the wounds, Les wrote the problem with Rock the Rink is that after 3 or 4 games of this, you find yourself playing in an autopilot, not really taking an interest in what's going on as the game gets more repetitive than an Australian soap opera. Les wrapped it up with a 4 out of 10 rating, saying that despite fun moments, genuinely original ideas in Rock the Rink are AWOL. The sports genre needs a good kick to stay fresh, but frankly, someone else will have to do it. And it's definitely not EA, that's for sure. The first racing sim for Part 2, Michelin Rally Masters Race of Champions, is our next game on this video. Developed by DICE, the studio behind the Battlefield series, was intended to be published by Gremlin Interactive, before the company was later bought up by Infogrames. As a matter of fact, Infogrames planned to have it released in the US as part of a test drive series, only for them to drop that branding after securing a licensing deal with the tire manufacturer Michelin. Covered on issue 58, the review from Dean is 2 pages long, and starts off saying that rally games are all over the PS1 like flies on a fresh cowpad. When Colin McRae Rally first appeared 2 years prior, it sparked something of a rally game gold rush, with the likes of Rally Championship, V-Rally 1 and 2, and even Tommy McKinnon Rally. Michelin Rally Masters was the latest game to get a slice of that pie, with the difference being that it's based on the annual Race of Champions held in Gran Canaria. With plenty to criticize, he made a comparison between this and Colin McRae Rally 2.0. In the comparison, Rally Masters was the elephant man of rally games, with the foul looks and wonky cars, the interior looking like it's a Tommy truck piloted by the Invisible Man regarding the realism, as well as the fact that unlike Colin McRae Rally 2.0, you cannot drive in for a close-up view of a tractor. With a score of 4 out of 10, Dean wrote that Rally Masters is the Joe brand of beauty, the Daphne and Celeste of pop, and the Asda Palm brand of jeans. It chokes in the dust of McRae's latest effort at the time, as it plows awkwardly into the ditch between realism and arcade fun. Covering another type of sport, All-Star Tennis 2000 comes to us from Ubisoft. Developed by Aqua Pacific, All-Star Tennis 2000 features 10 different tournaments in which you can compete on 8 different courts from all over the world, and digitized versions of 7 actual tennis players, each with their own strengths and weaknesses to boot. Steve K took this game to the court for issue 58, and for a game called All-Star Tennis, he immediately pointed out that we all shouldn't expect the likes of Peter Sampras, Hedman, Agassi, Grad, Hingis or Celeste on this one, as we get some tennis also-rans and nobodies instead. While All-Star Tennis 2000 looks okay, Steve K mentioned the player animations are shocking in places. What's worse is the fact that it often makes you miss a shot that you will have easily have scooped back over the net in real life. Play this for 10 minutes and your blood pressure will hit the roof. And even if you ignored the all too frequent gameplay glitches, the game is still really dull and captures none of the excitement of a decent game of tennis can generate, especially when compared to the likes of Anna Kournikovska's Smash Court Tennis or Actua Tennis. Tennis is not exactly a complicated game to recreate, but as Steve K reckoned in his wrap-up, All-Star Tennis 2000 still managed to be dull, boring, and not very realistic at all. With a score of 4 out of 10, Anna K still rules the roost on the PlayStation 1. Based on an old TV show, the Dukes of Hazzard Racing for Home was released in 1999 and published by South Peak Interactive. Other games they published include Pinky and the Brain World Conquest, 2 Animaniacs PC games, The Flintstones Bedrock Bowling, and Boombots, made by the same creators behind Earthworm Jim and The Neverhood. They also worked with Topware Interactive to distribute both Two Worlds 1 and 2 and Dream Pinball 3D to the United States. The game itself was developed by Sinister Games, who only developed 5 games in total, with Batman Gotham City Racer being the last game before they disappeared from the face of the earth. Whether Ubisoft's acquisition of the studio was to blame or not is another story completely. Racing for Home is a third-person arcade racer where you take the general lead and drive all over the place, dodging Roscoe P. Coltrane, the sheriff, and Department Enostrate, and advancing the game's story. Reviewed by Alex as part of issue 58, The Dukes of Hazzard is one of those early 80s TV shows you probably loved as a kid, but like reruns of Airwolf and Dad's Army, it's all a bit lame now. And what we're dealing with here is an off-road clone of Driver, as it's essentially just car chases slapped together by a weak storyline. Alex criticized the game for its blocky looks and the other cars being dumb, as they constantly ram you from every direction, with some even appearing out of nowhere, which adds to the frustration. He concluded the review with a score of 4 out of 10, saying that since The Dukes of Hazzard looks shaky and the gameplay is too simple and repetitive, PS1 owners should just wait for Driver 2 if it's cops and robbers car chases thereafter. Known in Japan as Love Game's Yeh Yeh Tennis 2, Yeh Yeh Tennis, released in PAL regions in 2000, comes to us from Sunsoft. Following the pattern and gameplay style of its Japanese exclusive predecessor, Yeh Yeh Tennis features even more tennis courts to choose from, with a strong player character customization which lets the player set not only their character portrait and outfit appearance, but also the dominant hand, footwork skills, and the terrain type he or she excels at. This one is yet another anonymous review, this time coming from issue 58, which starts off saying that it looks pretty darn similar to Anna Kournikovska's Smash Court Tennis, but it's at a disadvantage straight off, since it doesn't have the ex-communist beauty showing off her perfect pins on the cover. Compared to Anna K, Yeh Yeh Tennis is slower to play, the animation's lousy, and the tricky gameplay doesn't square with the cutesy looks. It's far too difficult to return shots, so you never get any big rallies going, usually boiling down to a case of ping, ping, damn, and that gets dull fast. And not to mention it's too easy to bounce the ball off the top of the net and fox your opponent. So yeah, this one got a 4 out of 10 rating, meaning Anna K still rules the PlayStation 1 tennis scene. Released in Japan in 1999 and brought to Europe by System 3 a year later, Toshinden 4 was the final game in the Battle Arena Toshinden series, which made its debut on the PlayStation all the way back in 1995, where it was one of the headliners for the console's North American launch. Toshinden 4 attempts to return to the series' roots after Toshinden 3's radical departure. As a result, Toshinden 4 was old school for its time, and not in a good way, I might add. Other major issues include the fact that it sacrificed the detail for speed and fluid animation, less playable characters, and only 3 of them making return as replacements for the 40 plus characters that the series built up, and the story being, well, terrible. Now, I remember seeing the game having a page on the now defunct Crappy Games wiki, stating that this was a similar story to what happened with Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier, as it was a game that killed the series on the same platform it made its debut, in this case the PlayStation 2. The major difference, however, was that Toshinden 4 was developed by Tamsoft, the studio that made all of the Toshinden games. I mean, say what you will about The Lost Frontier, but at least Naughty Dog admitted that they had regrets handing it off to High Impact Games later saying that they were not happy with it being the series' swan songs, and how things could have been a lot better behind the scenes. It kinda makes me wonder what exactly happened behind the scenes that led to the game ending up the way it was. But for Toshinden 4, what was its excuse that would lead to its IP holder Takara burying the franchise for good, even after they attempted making a reboot for the Wii in 2009, whose low sales and reception ensured the series will never return with a new game, other than its first game being included with the PlayStation Classic mini console? That, my friends, is something we'll never know. Not in English, anyway. Needless to say, the moment it got reviewed by Paul on issue 59, Toshinden 4 was out for the count faster than Lo Savarese. Among many things, he criticized the ropey graphics, basic gameplay, the lackluster character lineup, and the embarrassing special attacks and combos that are so easy to pull off, even a dimwit has a chance to win with their limited skills. It got a score of 4 out of 10, with Paul basically saying you just get Tekken 3 instead. In a confusing name situation reminiscent of King's Field, the PAL Monster Rancher we have here is actually Monster Rancher 2, as the actual Monster Rancher 1 never saw a release in Europe. While both games eventually got remastered in 2021 in form of Monster Rancher 1 and 2 DX, that was exclusive on PC via Steam and Nintendo Switch, the latter of which has a console exclusive. As a result of the latter, the PS4 and 5 owners were practically screwed over by the IP owner Koei Tecmo. Anyway, Monster Rancher 2 is at heart an arena fighting game with a lot of ancillary gameplay thrown in. Like in the previous game, this game allows players to create a monster using an innovative technique. You can stick in any CD you own, and I mean any CD, and the data that is read off the CD is used to generate the characteristics of the monster. Said monsters can be trained and raised so they can get stronger, thus increasing your chances of winning the fighting arenas. Dean reviewed the series' European debut for issue 61, who is not at all excited about all the hubbub. Gameplay wise, all you do is raise the monsters and train them to make them stronger, while during battles you give the monster advice during fights. And that's what made Dean consider that there is no RPG in there to make it interesting. Think of it as cruelty to a virtual pet, because that's pretty much what's going on. You can preserve and combine creatures if you get right into it, making uber killing machines, or in his recommendation, play a game that was actually interesting and good. He ended the review with a 4 out of 10, saying that for PlayStation, it's a pretty original concept, and hardcore fans might swear it's the next big thing. But as Dean will point out, Tekken or Metal Gear fans are unlikely to be among them. Any boxing aficionado may know this game by its US release, Mike Tyson Boxing. For those in the PAL region, the game is based around the other famed boxer, Prince Naseem Hamed, instead. Regardless of which athlete is endorsing it, this Cult Masters developed game features 16 international locations, as well as World Game Mode, which features 90 boxers and is career-based, the long-term objective being to manage a chosen boxer through a successful career. With the review that's 3 pages long, Steve D played this one as part of a final issue, who starts off with his disappointment seeing how the game with Prince Naseem's name on it had all the swagger of a drunken brickie, the showsmanship of a water buffalo with stage fright, and the hitting power of a 3-week-old baby girl. Boxing has had a potted history on the PS1, with the likes of Victory Boxing and Knockout Kings failing to capture the excitement of a sport, and only Midway's Ready to Rumble really shining through. But as Steve D puts it, the folks at Codemasters, who slaved over this for 2 years, must have been punch drunk, as the only hit it delivers is a sucker punch to the unfortunates who buy it. Steve D criticized the game for the gameplay being nursery school simple, sluggish controls, and flaky visuals. With a score of 4 out of 10, Steve D concludes that while the PlayStation Plus/PlayNation staff is used to boxing games being bad on the PS1, but being landed with something as dire as this is just below the belt. To finish up the lineup of games with a 4 out of 10 rating, we take a look at the only Disney game to be featured on a video, courtesy of Ubisoft and Buena Vista Games. More specifically, the PS1 version we have here was developed by Ubisoft's Shanghai division. Known in the US as Walt Disney's The Jungle Book Rhythm and Groove, Jungle Book Groove Party is a dancing game very much modeled after Dance Dance Revolution. It follows the same story as the original animated movie, though some songs are remixes of the film's music, while others are the original versions. Also reviewed on a final issue, Dean doesn't seem to have much to say toward this one, given that the game is pretty basic, as you just press up, down, left and right in time with the music. He did say that the game is shallower than a kiddie's paddling pool. While it starts off easy and gets slightly harder, but it never quite feels satisfying. In fact, it was like Parappa the Rapper, but without the style or humor. He ended the review with a 4 out of 10, saying that it's okay as a minor distraction, but be honest, what's the point? Why not just buy the video if you like the movie, or the soundtrack if you like the songs? Come to think of it, why not just play Vib Ribbon with the Jungle Book soundtrack inserted onto the PlayStation? Going into the 3 out of 10 category, we begin with EA Sports Supercross 2000, developed and published by Electronic Arts, with some additional contract work from MBL Research. Released in 1999, this is a Supercross motorcycle simulation game, officially licensed by the AMA. It features racing through 16 rail stadium tracks with professional commentary, and freestyle tricks mode with special tracks. The bikes have realistic physics and AI. 2 players can race split screen, and replay mode lets you fly anywhere. For issue 52, Adam starts off his review with an off-the-wall question of, since when did US Supercross feature lawnmower riding stick insects? Supercross 2000 will be the pits by any measure, but as it was released within a few weeks of Championship Motocross, which Adam gave an 8 out of 10 in the same issue, it looks less the pits and more like one-way escalator to hell. With his criticism toward the lack of control and lousy visuals, he gave it a 3 out of 10, saying that EA Sports Supercross 2000 gets a one-way ticket to the sin bin, and it deserves to be renamed Supercross 1984 if it's to avoid the interest of trading standards authorities. First released for the Sega Saturn in 1997 as a Japanese exclusive, Grandia was ported to the PlayStation in 1999. However, its PAL release wouldn't come out until 2000, and that's the version PlayStation Plus/PlayNation reviewed on issue 54. Developed by Game Arts, Grandia eventually saw an HD remaster for PC in 2019, with the HD collection containing remasters of both the original and its sequel coming to the Switch in the same year, though PlayStation and Xbox fans had to wait a bit longer, as they had to wait until 2024 for the collection to hit PlayStation 4 and both Xbox One and Series consoles. Written for issue 54, this is the first anonymous review for this category, and given that the JRPG fans are a touchy lot, to put it mildly, maybe going incognito was for the best. Whoever it is wrote that Grandia is a long-winded, text-heavy RPG which is so damn boring that all copies of it should be sealed inside an iron ball and fired into the sun. With them saying that this is like Final Fantasy VIII without the neat eye candy of the spell effects and without the tear-jerking cutscenes, the review concludes with a score of 3 out of 10, saying that unless you've got a deep liking for page after page of statistics and stilted, piss-poor conversations that go on for days, give Grandia the dodge. Next up is Star Ixiom, first released in Japan in 1999, with the PAL release coming out the following year. Developed by Kuso Kagaku Corp., this is actually a remake of Namco's 1985 Famicom game Star Luster. Much like the original Star Luster, it mixes the first-person space combat, strategic planning, and some aspects of a role-playing genre. There are 3 game modes on offer: Training, Command, and Conquest. Training mode is, well, training. In Command mode, you go out on separate missions where you systematically fight through one alien race at a time, while in Conquest mode, you are given a large, randomly created map of a solar system that shows the location of your enemies and friendly objects such as planets and laboratories that you must defend. This space battle epic had been in a pipeline for a very long time, and the anonymous writer wishes it had stayed there when they reviewed it for issue 55. Being a mixture of a strategy game and a shooter, the reviewer considered both to be dreadful, with the space battles looking dated and playing slowly, the 2D radar being pants, and the strategy bits being about as gripping as chess against a barcode designer. The review ends with a 3 out of 10 rating, saying that you should stick to Colony Wars Red Sun for Star Wars thrills and ditch this dross. Gekido Urban Fighters is the next on the 3 out of 10 category, and what we have here is one of the few 3D beat-em-up games to come out for the 5th generation of consoles. Developed by Naseem, Gekido's European release was published by Infogrames, whereas the US release was handled by Interplay. The PAL release was also given a budget re-release by Zoo Digital Publishing in 2003 as part of a Zoo Classics line. While the cover for the US release brags about the game featuring music by Fatboy Slim and Apartment 26, some of you might be surprised to learn that Marvel comic book artist Joel Mad also contributed to the game's development. Reviewed on issue 56, Rob criticized Gekido for looking incredibly messy and confused, as it just gets too busy to keep up with, especially when there are several enemies on screen, which there usually are. Another problem was that the special moves create confusion, to the point that while in co-op, you end up punching your mate half the time instead of the enemy. In the 4-player arena mode, Rob got an even better sense of Gekido's limitations, as there aren't many moves to get to grips with even specials being box standard and the rage mode being useless. He ended the review on a 3 out of 10, saying that there's precious little to praise here, being a game that's tired, old stuff, and is way too confusing to get into, while recommending you'd stick to Core Design's Fighting Force 2 instead. Yet another EA game to get a beating from PlayStation Plus/PlayNation, Road Rash Jailbreak is next on the video. Released in 2000, this was the final game in the Road Rash series, and it's another example of EA serving as both developer and publisher. Les reviewed this one on issue 56, who starts off saying that Road Rash Jailbreak is practically Driver on a motorbike. The problem was, the game was only good when it first appeared on the Mega Drive back in the day, and the bid to upgrade it had resulted in a dismal failure. And by the way, Les got the release year wrong, as he claims the first Road Rash came out in 1854, when it actually came out in 1991. He criticized the game for the dated graphics, the gameplay having barely changed in the 9 years the series has been around, the on-bike scrapping that's about as tough as a rock in the Huggies Nappies disco, and the time trials being an afterthought. He gave this game a 3 out of 10, saying that the Road Rash name on the PlayStation has been a disappointment, suggesting you'd forget this when there are better bike games like Championship Motocross featuring Ricky Carmichael, or better urban racers like Driver. Going back to the racing sims, next we have Test Drive 6. Developed by the Pitbull Syndicate, later known as Midway Studios Newcastle, the 6th main 9 entry in the Test Drive series was published in the US by Infogrames, but for some reason they didn't publish the game themselves in PAL regions. Instead, the European release was published by Cryo Interactive, who was scrutinized multiple times throughout Part 1. Rob reviewed this one for issue 58, and he starts off by saying that the first 5 Test Drive games were kinda okay driving games. With the 6th mainline entry, you get the sense that the folks at Accolade, who was acquired by Infogrames, and the Pitbull Syndicate have gone the extra mile with its host of extras and bonus doodads. You can bet on each race and scoop tons of cash if you bluff the other drivers into staking their life savings against you winning. You can play as a cop, chasing after speed-busting racers. You can tackle some of the looping tracks as a high-speed challenge, dodging oncoming traffic in an attempt to notch up a perfect time. And all of this would have been great if the actual game had been any good. Unfortunately, Rob wrote that Test Drive 6 was so bad, the PlayNation crew's first reviewer broke free from his guards and hurled himself out of a 4th-story window rather than play any further. Rob criticized the cars that look and handle like bricks, the slow, jerky and stupid crashes, handling being more rough around the edges than Camilla, and the scenery popping into view on every corner, looking like a kid's finger painting once it eventually appears. He gave it a 3 out of 10, saying that Test Drive 6 is how it feels when you fill your petrol motor up with diesel. It lasts 2 minutes before grinding into a halt, sick as a dog. And stinking like a dog, too. Another PAL exclusive on the list? Don't mind if I do. Released in 2000 and published by Ubisoft, Infestation was developed by Frontier Developments, who are best known today as the studio behind Planet Coaster, Jurassic World Evolution, and Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. In this game, You'll drive an upgradable buggy, an experimental vehicle named Akam. It can be transformed into 6 different shapes. You can turn it into an aircraft or even a hovercraft. You have to shoot aliens with flashy weapons, collect resources such as crystals, energy spheres, and lost scientists. And so you, a single human hero, must put evil aliens in their place and introduce them to your plasma cannon. For issue 59, Pat first wrote that for starters, the gameplay is limp, and you'll soon find yourself spinning blindly in circles, not having a clue what's going on. Then there's the complete lack of variety, as the action remains the same throughout. Landscapes are convoluted and misleading, and the novelty of jumping large gaps with your turbo boost wears thinner than Homer Simpson's pants after a few minutes of play. He concluded the review with a score of 3 out of 10, saying that there is fun to be had there, but only if you overlook the rubbish graphics and the way below standard gameplay. While we do have one more EA title to cover on this video, this is certainly the last one from their EA Sports label. Developed by EA's UK studio, later known as EA Bright Light, the FA Premier League Stars 2001 was a sequel to the original 1999 game that was part of a short-lived FIFA spin-off series. Being 2 pages long, the review from issue 60 comes from Steve D, who was filled with dread when he was assigned to reviewing this one. It was another football game with an official license after all, and it was a bad start when the players don't look a thing like the real people, with Andy Cole's model being black, Gary McAllister being bald, and Dennis Bergkamp being blonde. He criticized the game for being ropey, playing like pinball on grass, and resembles football as much as Jeremy Beadle looks like Brad Pitt. Steve D also pointed out the fact that putting a game out like this at the same price as Konami's ISS Evolution and, ironically, EA's own FIFA 2000 is like asking you to pay as much to go and see Rushden Diamonds or Kettering Town as you would see Manchester United or Arsenal. He also criticized the team for being bone stupid, as your players back you up about as much as you can rely on your girlfriend to buy you the complete Match of the Day video set for your birthday. In defense, your centre-backs scuttle like frightened chickens to the corners of your box, leaving a gap you could drive a herd of buffalo through. And in attack, forwards make runs with all the intelligence of lobotomized pigs. He ended the review with a 3 out of 10, saying that against stiff competition from the likes of EA's own FIFA and Konami's ISS, this comes out on the receiving end of a serious hiding. Great license, but little else, with Steve D calling the FA Premier League Stars 2001 the Wimbledon of football games. Crude, ugly, and plays like a donkey. It wouldn't even make the Arsenal ladies youth team. Based on a classic Hanna-Barbera cartoon of the same name, our next game is Wacky Races, released in Japan and Europe in 2000. Although it shares the same box art as the Sega Dreamcast version that came out the same year, the PS1 version is not a straight port. While the Dreamcast version, which did see a North American release, was developed by Gremlin Interactive, known as Infogrames Studios Sheffield at that time, the PS1 version was instead developed by Appaloosa Interactive, whose past work include Echo the Dolphin, Tiny Tank, and Jaws Unleashed. and judging by the footage, yeah, there's a good reason Infogrames ported the Dreamcast version to the PlayStation 2 the following year. Dean's review from issue 61 definitely didn't help matters, as he wrote that Wacky Races wasn't the funniest cartoon to begin with, and the PS1 game is even less amusing, with the basic roster of a main cast and some hideously designed circuits, which include the clifftop corner so sharp you drop off the side, falling so far back it's difficult to recover. Dean ended the review with a 3 out of 10, saying that playing the PS1 Wacky Races is as much fun as swallowing a fly, with the only thing about it is shed load of idiots buying this game on name alone, so you would laugh with the PlayNation staff at them. Back in part 1, we saw PlayStation Plus review Castrol Honda Superbike Racing, which they gave it a middling score of 30% on issue 47. As one of the two games from Midas Interactive to be reviewed in the same page from their final issue, Castrol Honda VTR, released in 2001, saw a similarly negative response from the publication. Much like its predecessor, it was developed by Midas and Bubble Boy. But unlike its predecessor, VTR did not see a North American release, though it did come out in Japan as part of a Superlight 1500 series. Steve K's review from the final issue stated that motorbikes should give you a fast, frenetic rush, which Castrol Honda VTR didn't. What with MotoGP on the PlayStation 2 looking lovely, and Motor Racer World Tour keeping up to the PS1 end of things, we now move on to this game. While the two above capture the excitement of riding at 150 miles per hour on two wheels, VTR has all the thrills of riding a kid's bike, possibly a tricycle. While it does have a lot of tracks and different gameplay features, as well as a decent sense of speed, the problem was that when you look at the trackside detail and rider, it's all too easy to notice the flaws. The riders jerk like Shakin' Stevens and they're poorly animated, which is a stark contrast to Motor Racer World Tour, and VTR is incredibly boring to play. He ended the review on a score of 3 out of 10, which makes it the last game to get the rating, saying that VTR looks rubbish, doesn't play much better, and generally sucks a fat one. There were plenty more fun ways of blowing 25 quid, like throwing it away, as Steve K's example. Jumping back to Gus's quickfire reviews from issue 50, the first game of the 2 out of 10 group is Hellnight, also known in Japan as Dark Messiah. Developed by Denno Eizo Seisakusho and published by Atlus in 1998, it's a survival horror game at heart, but you cannot actually fight monsters. As the only monster in the whole game is invulnerable, you have to escape it in maze-like levels, making sure it doesn't catch you. According to Gus in his mini-review, Hellnight is the crappiest hopeful to fall off the Resident Evil bandwagon, criticizing it for its terrible graphics, banal puzzles, dull characters, and badly drawn 3D mazes. He gave Hellnight a 2 out of 10, calling it disgustingly bad. Our next 2 out of 10 score on the video is Hot Wheels Turbo Racing, released in 1999 and developed by Stormfront Studio. As this is a final appearance for EA on the video, now that might be a perfect time to mention that while I was writing the script for part 2, there was something funny about EA titles on this video. If you recall my Sega Saturn magazine video, EA and Acclaim had once shared a segment where it was the third time they were given a critical beating by the publication. EA got off lucky on that video, as Acclaim still had 3 more games for me to talk about. In the case of PlayStation Plus/PlayNation, Acclaim was lambasted 4 times on Part 1, with Part 2 only being scorned twice. That means they had the exact same number of appearances on my Sega Saturn magazine video. But after doing some quick research, looks like EA is the real punching bag this time, as EA was given a critical beating 7 times in this video alone. If I had removed the 4 out of 10 group from the video, EA and Acclaim would be at a tie with just 4 games. But if I limited the maximum score to 30% on Part 1, that will mean that Acclaim would only have a total of 2 appearances, much like on the Cube magazine video, meaning that EA will still have the most appearances on any video in the worst rated game series on the Full Scene Arcade. Reviewed on issue 52, we have an anonymous review who wrote that judging from the screenshot or the footage you are seeing here, Hot Wheels Turbo Racing is absolutely pants central. The sad thing is that the idea of huge racing cars racing around roller coaster tracks trying to pull stunts isn't all that bad. It's just that Hot Wheels Turbo Racing belongs at the breakers. Dire graphics were the obvious point, but it's the other screw-ups that mean that this is a 24-karat stinker. For starters, the game steers for you, so it's possible to come first simply by holding down the accelerator. Then, when you do the stunts, it's mostly spins and loops, and it doesn't feel like you're a car hurling through the air at death-defying speed, but more like as if you are piloting a Tetris block floating gently to earth. Along with the poor tracks, lack of variety, and syrupy handling, the game got a score of 2 out of 10. Now that EA bows out, we get to move on to a console conversion of a PC game. Originally released in 1998 by PopTop Software and published by Gathering of Developers, it's a strategy game where you manage a railroad business as you establish yourself as a mogul to be reckoned with as you work your way up the ranks of the railway industry. Railroad Tycoon II was ported to the PlayStation by Tremor Entertainment in 1999 and 2000. The port saw an average score of 71% on mobile games, with most critics giving positive scores, despite the fact that unlike the Gold Edition port for the Dreamcast, it did not include scenarios from the 2nd Century expansion alongside the new console-exclusive scenarios on top of it. Another anonymous review comes to us from issue 53, who thought the idea of a game where you build up a railroad company by managing tracks, stations and engines was enough to ask to send them to the sleeping car. The review wrote that the biggest challenge here actually lies in staying awake, as unlike many other sim games, let alone those ported to the PlayStation 1, Railroad Tycoon 2 just doesn't have that hook that makes you want to keep going. There's precious little humor, poor graphics, and an appallingly dull subject. The review ends with a score of 2 out of 10, saying that unless you like being bored brainless, avoid Railroad Tycoon 2. Like how we all got to see Masters of Terrascasi in Part 1, we now get to another PS1 game where we go to a galaxy far, far away. As one of the games based on the Phantom Menace, Jedi Power Battles, released in 2000, was published and developed by LucasArts. And much like Gekido, It's one of the rare examples of a 3D beat-em-up on a 5th generation console. The original PS1 version wasn't exactly an easy game if you're playing it on your own, and most of the critical reception saw it to be mediocre at best. And yet in 2025, Aspire Media, the same folks who remastered Soul Reaver 1 and 2 and Tomb Raider 1 through 6, decided to give it a re-release for modern platforms, which not only includes content that were exclusive to the Dreamcast version, but also letting you play as previously locked characters from the get-go, toggling lightsaber colors to match the films, adding an optional modern control scheme, and adding new playable characters. Oh, and letting you play as Jar Jar Binks for some reason. As part of issue 57, Jedi Power Battles was reviewed by Alex, and it's 2 pages long. He began by saying that games based on movies have in the past been notoriously awful, but The Phantom Menace pushed it too far. With the blocky graphics, clunky and frustrating gameplay and all. And that game was developed by Big Ape Productions. Jedi Power Battles was worse, as 9 months after the original, things have taken a giant leap backwards, as it was one of the most appalling games on the PS1, and with many flaws, you're guaranteed to hate it within the first 5 minutes. And the more you stick at it, the more anger will grow at forking out 35 quid on this. No blinding hidden extras or cool set pieces against smart looking bosses. And what's worse, to even get a proper glimpse of Darth Maul, surely the only reason to play a game based on episode 1, you have to play for hours. And when the game's tougher than Lennox Lewis, chances are you don't have the patience for it. As Alex pointed out, the list of things wrong with Jedi Power Battles is very, very long, but there are about half a dozen major flaws which make this, in his words, one of the worst games ever. Among many flaws, he criticized the basic and blocky graphics, the laughably rigid animation, the too samey enemies, limited moves, and pathetic force attacks, which makes the Jedi Knights you play as look like white belt karate kids who can't string combos together. And the 2-player mode is just as bad, as you're twice as likely to lose a life from falling off a ledge or messing up a jump, even when it wasn't your fault. Alex ended the review with a score of 2 out of 10, calling Jedi Power Battles an insult to the classic movies which inspired the generation, describing the game as awkward and fiddly to play, with the sucky visuals and repetitive gameplay. He also addressed the elephant in the room by criticizing the game's ridiculously hard difficulty, as even if you put the common sense aside and play for a few hours, you won't get past level 2. Let's just say that the force was not strong with this one. Much like Castrol Honda VTR, Equestriad 2001 was reviewed on the final issue of PlayStation Plus/PlayNation. Also published by Midas Interactive, this one scored less than VTR, given the score of 2 out of 10. Developed by Tantalus Interactive and IR Goros Interactive, Equestriad 2001, known in the US as Equestrian Showcase, is a horse riding simulator. Included events are military, show jumping, and dressage riding. Famous horses are included, but you can create your own horse as well. Many real courses are included and let you participate in different competitions in different difficulties that will unlock bonuses. As the final review on the magazine as a whole, Steve K starts off by saying that horses are magnificent beasts, especially when the one you put 50 quid on wins the Grand National at 50 to 1. But they're also synonymous with bad things, like all the droppings those police horses leave on the high street. So it's quite apt when he said that Equestriad 2001 is undoubtedly an absolute pony. Unless you have a double-barreled name, call your mother Mumsy, and happen to be competing, Equestrian is not exactly the most exciting of sports for most people. But even so, most of us can't imagine young girls and Lucinda Green wannabes galloping down to a local HMV to slip this in their saddlebags, simply because it's awful. According to the folks at Midas Interactive, realism is the watchword, with cutting-edge 3D graphics. Come on, Midas, who are you trying to convince? I've seen more cutting-edge 3D graphics in Bubsy 3D, and that came out in 1996. Steve K is on the same boat, as the game isn't just pony, it's dog, and one that isn't even house-trained. He gave Equestriad 2001 a score of 2 out of 10, saying that if you want to play with horses, go down to the farm. If you want a good simulation, buy Gran Turismo instead. And now we get to what PlayStation Plus / PlayNation considered to be the worst game they ever reviewed for Part 2. Developed by Runecraft, Barbie Super Sports was first released in 1999 in the US by Mattel Media, with the PAL release being published by Sony themselves. How embarrassing. Barbie Super Sports focuses on snowboarding and rollerblading, and both events have a practice area where Barbie gives advice on how to race and get better scores, which will earn tickets that can be traded in for better equipment. And you'll need better equipment if you want to beat Barbie and her friends. After beating the computer-controlled opponents, you can play against another player to a race in local 2-player mode, or see who can complete a course the fastest in a time trial mode. This one got a real beating on issue 56, with this review being the last from an anonymous reviewer who gave it the lowest score of 1 out of 10. In fact, how about that I read this short review to emphasize on how PlayNation chucked a shrimp at this Barbie. We're not going to diss this game because it's meant for 7-year-old nieces who smell of wee. We're going to diss it because even they deserve quality gameplay, and Barbie fails on this not exactly hard aim. You play Barbie or one of her 3 plastic gals, and together you can go either snowboarding or inline skating. There are a handful of courses to cruise around, pulling off stunts to earn points or going head to head with a girly chum to see whose Barbie is best. The ingredient missing is gameplay. The emphasis is on picking snowboarding kits rather than playing for fun. This will make PlayStation as attractive to tiddlers as a dental visit. We don't recommend this even if you're fresh out of a local primary school. Ouch. And now we end our journey here. While the dramatic conclusion is much shorter than in Part 1, I still find this rather fascinating regardless. Though looking back at Part 1, I am wondering on which is worse, Saban's Is No Good from Part 1 or Barbie Super Sports from Part 2. The former had a score of 9%, while the 1 out of 10 score would pretty much translate to a 10%. Both were equally abysmal according to the magazine, but between the two games, It's hard to tell which one truly deserves the dishonor of the worst game ever reviewed by PlayStation Plus/PlayNation. Let me know in the comments which one do you think deserves this dishonor more. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time on the Full Scene Arcade.